My name is Steve. Next to me is Dave.
I'm Dave.
Hi. You are in that. Effective youth leader.
Is it
B in effective. So what we want to do this morning is really just take some time out and just kind of really facilitate a discussion. It's not our intention to stand here and kind of lecture you on, all the maybe things that maybe you think you're not doing that you ought to be doing. Because many of you are doing really, really great things and probably can teach us a whole lot about what you're doing and what's working. The idea is for us to present some ideas and concepts and things that we think are kind of vital to the role of being a youth leader in one capacity or another, and then offer some tips and tricks on those, and then also hear back from you guys of like, hey, what works in my context, what works here, or what hasn't worked, those kind of things, or questions. So at any point during this time, you have a question or a clarification or something you want to add to the discussion, just fire your hand up and we'll ignore you.
But if you shout really loud, we'll hear you.
And we'll pause and we'll have that discussion. That's perfect. And if this talk takes a little bit of a left turn or a right turn down a little bit of a different path, because that's what you guys need, totally fine. So next to me is Dave Nicodemus. Dave, tell us a little about who you are and why you get to stand here.
I'm not sure sometimes why I get to stand here. I feel like years ago I got pigeonholed to be on stage with Mark, and that's our gig. But I have a day job as well, and I'm a youth pastor in Columbus, Ohio, and I've been at the church I'm at right now for 12 years, ready to go into my 13th year. Had a 2-year, not a sabbatical, but a 2-year change of role on my church staff and jumped into a different position, and then came back to it 2 years ago. And so it was a crazy experience to gain some perspective, actually, that was unintended, but it was great. But grew up in Western Pennsylvania, went to Grace College, always wanted to, from about the time I was in 11th grade, go into ministry and be a youth pastor, and so I went for it and pursued that. But that's where I am today.
Cool. Well, again, my name is Steve. My official title is Vice President of Youth Ministry for CE National. Before that, I was on staff at Awana Clubs International as the Executive Director of the youth program there. And many people, when I say that, say, Awana Youth Ministry. And yes, and it's actually really cool. In fact, that's how I got connected with Momentum in the first place, is because we were working on a curriculum on apologetics with Sean McDowell. And Ed heard about it and got really fired up about it, and I kind of told that story briefly, and that's how Ed called me, why he called me in my office, and got talking about that. And he originally last year wanted me to come and share about that program. So there's a whole bunch of things that they were doing that was really cool. Before that, I was an educator for 12 years. I'm still an adjunct prof for Trinity International University in Deerfield, Illinois. I teach in classes online, which is sort of strange, but I try real hard to do that, make that work. So I'm coming at this conversation from an educator perspective. A lot of years of dealing with students 5 days a week. 5-6 hours a day as a football coach. After that, traveling with students, putting on conferences with students, having student leadership teams, kind of just always being around students for a long, long time. And also that world of parents. And so I always used to say it's youth ministry from a different perspective. And I worked in a couple of different schools where we partnered with roughly 100 or so churches. So it gave me a chance to see things from a wide variety. Before that, I was not saved at all and in a whole different life. So I went to Moody for my seminary degree, and then I went to Loyola for a fancy apologetics degree. Which is also how I got connected with Sean. So that's kind of how we're going to come at this conversation. Why Dave and I thought this would be a good idea. Another plug. We probably should plug it now, right?
Plug it away.
Dave and I have a podcast together. Maybe you've heard of it. It's called Operation Insight. Because he lives in Ohio and I live in Indiana, we have a hard time getting together. So we're working on that. Maybe we'll do some this week. We have a fancy that we just kind of sit and talk and hang out and share youth ministry stories and have a good time. So you should check that out. There is a brand new website of resources where all of this stuff will be on as well, called missioninsights.org. You can check that out. It's in your from your information. You got the address for that, and it's got blogs, videos, podcasts, a whole bunch of stuff designed specifically for you guys. But like I said, that's how we're going to come at this conversation, from the youth pastor side, from the teacher side, to hopefully really round out this conversation. So let's dive. Well, you know what? Let's pray before we dive in. I get all excited when we dive in. Let me pray for us. God, we're thankful for today. We're thankful for this group. Just the commitment that they have to their students. And Father, I pray for this time that you would be here, that your Spirit be upon this place and in each and every one of us, speaking to us, using this time, using this information, using Dave and I to really just communicate what you want us to communicate. Father, I pray this time is refreshing for all of us. Give us a little bit of hope, a little bit of an insight, some tools, some tricks, some tips to take back to our ministry so that we can be the best possible leaders of our students that we can be. We thank you for the opportunity to be here. We're thankful for the momentum and all the volunteers and people that are here to make this all happen. And God, we're grateful for the youth leaders that bring their kids. Without that, it just doesn't happen. So God, we dedicate this time to you, and that we pray that you bless us. In Jesus' name, amen.
All right, let's jump into this. We kind of, as we began to talk, decided how can we organize this a little bit so it's not just like random, fire hose stuff. So we come up with like volunteer expectations. How many of you in here are a paid youth worker? Okay. And the rest of you, how many are volunteers? Okay, good. It's a good ratio too. But volunteer expectations is one thing, and then we thought about parental involvement, leading by serving, and successful mentoring. And so some of those things we're going to try to touch on. That'll keep us on track a little bit. But I'm a youth pastor because of a youth pastor and because of volunteers. I was a high school student who had no ambition in life other than get married and work in a factory and stay where I was and planted there for the rest of my life. And a youth pastor, my youth pastor, when I was in 9th or 10th grade, started to say, I see some things in you, Dave, that you could do. Here's some leadership opportunities. And I'm like, what? I'm the kid that sits in the back row and giggles the whole time you talk and throws spitballs, like literal schools, chew up paper and throw it at the back of people's heads. And I wasn't the bad kid, but I was the kid that was being dragged along by the bad kids. I was kind of just a chameleon, and I would just float, and they were doing these things, and I'm like, I guess that's what's cool, I'll do it. But there were some guys that were a year ahead of me, and they were sitting in the front row at youth group, and they were engaged, and I always kind of had a line, like, I should be there, but here's where I am, here's where I'm stuck. And so my youth pastor started to gently guide me and give me opportunities, and went through some crises in life as a high schooler, some things that I really needed help with, and youth leaders, volunteers stepped in and helped me and walked alongside of me during some of my older high school years. And that's why I am where I am today, because they came alongside of me. They spoke into my life. Now here's the thing. I love to have opportunities to speak, deliver a message, things like that. But for my youth pastor, I can't remember any of the messages that he ever taught. I don't remember any of them. Yeah, I can't. But I do remember Todd, and I remember Danny, and I remember Rick, and I remember Brenda, and I remember Steve and Lori, and I remember all of these people that spent time with me and poured into me. And so as a youth pastor now, you guys, especially volunteers, adult volunteers, you are the lifeblood and the fuel of the student ministry. It's not the program. Relationships are greater than programs. And we want to get, and I fall into this trap as a youth pastor. I want to build like this perfect structure, and I want everything to be on time, and I want it to work perfectly, and I want it to wow the kids, and they're going to go and talk to their friends about the crazy things we did. But really, it's the relationships. And the relationships trump that. And the first thing that, when I got into college and into the youth ministry program at Grace, it was said over and over again in the classes that relationships matter most. Relationships matter most. Relationships matter. And it was drilled into me to where honestly, I look back and I think my classes were good and I'm sure I learned things, but that's like the one thing that trumped everything else. Relationships matter most. And it's so important, yet it's so easy to forget. And so when we think about volunteers and what your role might be and what the expectations are, that's my number one job description for any of my volunteers. Build relationships. Now you may be sitting here thinking, but I want to do something. I want to have a job. And I know that often makes your job easier when you have a place to kind of hang your hat or a place to stand. And if there are those opportunities, take those opportunities. Seize them and do them. But know that your primary role, your primary responsibility as a youth leader, at a youth group, here, at Momentum, camps, things like that, is to build relationships. Because a youth pastor is one person, and they can't do it all. And they're kind of thinking for the whole group. They're trying to think this mass group, how do I move them? But it's really hard sometimes to individually dive into each life. And so we need you. As a youth pastor, we need you. And you're the lifeblood that makes it all happen. We often get into youth ministry because we love kids, because we love to serve. And so what happens is we begin to just start doing that. And we start serving. And I often forget sometimes as a youth pastor to train my youth workers well. I often also think that, well, they already know that. Who am I to tell them? Or my youth leaders are older than me, so how do I teach them something? They probably already know, but I forget to realize, you know what? I've done this part longer. I've had training in certain areas. I've spent more time thinking about these things, but I often just assume things that they already know or they should know. And that's a fault of mine, of not telling them even the basic things that I think everybody should know. And that's a bad place to be. So if you have questions as youth leaders, ask. One of the expectations I would love from my youth leaders is that they would probably ask more questions. That they would ask more things. How can I do this? How can I do this better? And I'm like, you don't know how to do that? I just assumed. I'm sorry. And then to help them. So as you're a volunteer youth worker working alongside, ask questions. Like, don't be afraid to do that. Your youth pastor wants to train you, wants to help you, but sometimes you get so busy doing things that it's a little bit of an oversight. And so don't be afraid to ask those questions. None of those kind of questions are dumb questions. They're helpful, and they help us realize our blind spots and where we're not sure what we're doing. There's a couple things that I'll maybe save these for a little bit later, but a few things that I want to share that maybe your youth pastor is afraid to tell you, because he's like, well, I don't want to tell them that, because they'll be mad at me. They should know that already, and I don't want to, so I'll save a few of those. But here's one thing that I'm going to give you. With the volunteer expectations. It's not all of the expectations, and there's many more things. But something that I heard from my friend Jordan Gillette, who's youth pastor at Goshen. Anybody here from Goshen? Anybody part of his youth staff? All right. Maybe you've heard this, maybe he shared this already, but I just want to give credit where credit is due. This is not my thought. In fact, I think he told me that it's not even his thought. He stole it from the church down the street of ideas. That's what we do. We take things and we use them for our purposes and recycle them. But one of the most practical job descriptions that I have ever heard of or seen for a youth group leader, for an adult volunteer, a small group leader, is this. Like, it made it in like bite-sized chunks for me. So when you're with students, especially, let me ask this question. How many of you're a youth leader, you're a volunteer, but you also are a small group leader? You're organized in such a way that you have small groups that you lead. And so at some point in time, as part of it, you're also a small group. Or your group is already small, and so it's a small group. Okay, that might be the case as well. If you're larger, you may have broken it into small groups, or you're thinking, my group's small enough, it's a small group. But you have a manageable set of students that you can kind of like, okay, I know who they are, I know all their names, I know all their parents, I know things about them more than, whoa, I've got a big group, and because groups get big sometimes and you don't know who they might all be, and so you have to manage that right now. So if you're a small group leader or you're part of a small group and you lead students, here are some things to just make that manageable. Every week, be in their face. I think that's about here. In their face. So be in your student's face once a week. Weekly at youth group. That's when that can happen. You show up at the program, you're there, you talk to them, you're in their face, you ask them questions. How was their week? If possible, remember one thing that they told you last week that you can ask them about. It's hard to do with everybody, but if you have a smaller group or a core group of guys or girls that you're really pouring into, be in their face once a week. Second one, be in their phone. If they are old enough that they have phones, be in their phone, but not all the time. Parents get a little leery of that. And who are these adults texting my kids? First of all, ask permission. Connect with parents. We'll talk about parent a little bit, connections. Connect with the parents. But if you have that permission and that freedom to text your students or on social media or somehow to connect with them, do it. But make that like maybe once a month. So once a week you're in their face and you're with them. I wouldn't be texting them daily. I wouldn't be texting them even multiple times a week. But text them once a month. Be in their phone because their phone is their life. So be there. Be in their phone monthly. It can be good to be more consistently, but yeah, be aware of what parents' desires are. And if you build that relationship with them, that's good. You could even, though, take this away from being a phone thing and write them a handwritten note. Do that once a month. Once a note, something that you can encourage them with. Share some scripture with them. Just share something good that you've seen in them or that's encouraging. And write them a note and send it to them in the mail. But like once a month, do something where you're writing it, where they can read it and they know, I have been thought of, not at youth group. Some random time during the week, my youth leader thought of me, I came to mind. That's encouraging. Also, caution, don't share deep things over text. Don't counsel your students over text. Don't use that as a means. Maybe use that as a way to convey encouragement, and then use it as a way to set up face-to-face time. Or to encourage them, hey, we missed you tonight. Wish you would have been here. I would have loved to see you. Those kind of things. In their life. Be in their life. So you're in their face once a week, you're in their phone, or some kind of written communication once a month, and then you're in their life. And this might just be once a semester. You can't go to every game, you can't go to every play, you can't follow the entire schedule and be number one fan for all the kids and sit there. But maybe if you have a small group, once a semester, once a season or something like that, you can be there in the stands sitting by mom and dad or with some other students and cheering them on. You could even just show up at halftime when the game's free and the ticket doesn't cost anything anymore. And be there, get some pictures, give some high fives after the game, and you were there for part of the game, but celebrate them. And if you have a chance when you've shown up to one of their events that's in their schedule, that's part of their life, post about it. If you have social media and you use it, post about it, tag them, celebrate them, because they will feel honored that your friends know, whoa, these people care about me, they saw me here. And especially if you didn't get a chance to see them. If you didn't get a chance afterwards to take a picture with them, or you didn't get a chance afterwards to say hi and great job, they'll see, hey, I was here. And again, they cared enough to come. They cared enough to come to halftime. They cared enough to come and pay for a ticket, whatever it might be. It's also a great chance to really build a bridge with parents that way. When you sit in the bleachers, you sit in the stands with parents, they are honored that you would be there to care for their kid. And that builds bridges into their life. And then there's one more, I don't know if this was up there, in the picture. This is one I've added to what Jordan had shared with me. But these are big life moments, and they are not contained to weekly, monthly, or once a semester, but to be in the picture. These are the big life moments that happen when a crisis hits, or when tragedy strikes, or a huge celebration, graduation, birthday, death in the family, those kind of things. Like, you want to be there. I heard this said once that it's so important to just be in the picture. You may not know the words to say. You may not be able to counsel the student at that time and in that place, but they will remember that you were there. And so you want to be there, because being there communicates that you care. Being there communicates that you love them. And when more of those things happen, they may come to you and seek you out because they know, wow, they love me. They're not going to remember my sermon, they're not going to remember my message, but they are going to remember that you were there, and that's important. Second thing here, aside from those, don't be overwhelmed. There's so much to do, so much you want to do, so much you could do. Rejoice in the things that you do. Give yourself some space. Most of you, you're not paid youth workers, which means you have another job, and you probably have a family, and you have things to do. You don't have to do it all, but the things that you do it. Do it well, and don't feel guilty about the things you can't do. Give yourself a break on those kind of things. But when you're there, be all there. One more thing I want to share on this and volunteer expectations, and one of my expectations is that you would take care of yourself. And that sounds kind of simple, but if you are not spending time in God's Word, if you're not spending time praying, if you're not loving the Lord, that's not going to spill out. You're going to turn into just a chaperone. You're going to turn into just an adult that does the business side of things or puts out the snacks, and that's all you do. But when you are spending time with the Lord and you love Him, it's going to spill out. Those conversations are going to happen naturally. It says in Luke 6, I'm just going to read it off my notes instead of opening the Bible, but I brought one. But it's easier right here. Luke 6:39 says this. Jesus told a parable. Can the blind lead the blind? Will they not both fall into a pit? And then he said in verse 40 of Luke 6, the student is not above the teacher, but everyone who is fully trained will be like their teacher. You are teachers, you are leaders of them. And as you are following the Lord, they're following you. And they'll become like you. In many ways, as scary as that might be. And so I want to challenge you to be with the students spiritually. Students expect you to talk to them spiritually. They expect you to pour into their lives and point them to Jesus. And so don't just be that great guy, that great girl, the fun leader. Be fun. That's good. But don't miss the opportunity to pour into them spiritually. They know that's going to happen, and they kind of expect it. And if you don't talk to them about Jesus or pour into them spiritually, they're probably going to walk away disappointed or find somebody that will challenge them.
All right. So, how many of you are parents? How many of you are parents of teenagers? All right. So, most of you guys will know what I'm talking about. Because as parents, especially parents of teenagers, you're given a certain amount of justified irrationality when it comes to your kids. So I'm going to tell you a quick story. So my very first year of teaching, I had no formal training in how to actually do the job of being a teacher. I was sort of thrown into it and saying, here, you can talk to people. So I learned as I went, but there were some things I did not expect. I didn't expect parents to email me in the middle of the night, angry because how dare their child struggle with Bible homework. This is God's work. It should be easy. It should just come to them and it should be no big deal. But my favorite thing, well, one of them, two favorite things, I'll share two quick stories. I respect and admire the job of a youth leader, of a pastor. It's a job that I'm not sure that I was ever put out for. But there's one thing that I think I have on every youth pastor ever. Conferences. A couple times a year, parents come in specifically to talk to you about their kid. I'm terrible with names. So the parents were coming in my very first year. I had 175 students that I did not know everybody yet. They'd sit down and say, so, Mr. Kozak, how are you? I'd be like, oh, great. So, how's our daughter doing? I don't know. You don't want to say, who's your daughter? So you sit down, I had little tips and tricks as to figure out, like, you know, how that worked. So my very first year, conferences show up, right? I'm the new guy. We're going to do this for 2 nights in a row. Every parent has to come through, and every parent wants to see every teacher. So that's 6, 7, sometimes 8 people, depending on the kid's schedule. They only have a couple of nights to do it in, then you want to get through. So you literally have 5 minutes with everybody. This is like speed dating. But I'm the new guy. So there's no speed dating. So my favorite one is that I had a line, literally, out the door, around the corner, people just waiting. They were cleaning up chairs at the end of the night. I still had a line. And I was still sitting there with parents. Because they were coming up to me and saying, so, this is teaching. This is theology. This is like, and I'm like, So at the end of all that, I got an award from the faculty for the longest conference ever. I think I still hold the record. At the end of that year, I had a parent come to my office and asked to have a meeting with me. We sat down and talked, and she says to me, do you believe the Bible is the inspired word of God? I'm thinking to myself, well, of course I do. This is a trick question. It has to be. So I said, yeah, absolutely. Do you believe the Bible should be worshipped? Now I'm thinking, okay, what's going on? So I go into an explanation because I can't just answer one or two words. I got to explain. And she interrupts me and asks me again and again. And finally, I said, well, I'm not sure what you're asking. So we talked about it a little bit. And she was advocating that the physical Bible ought to be worshipped. And I asked her, well, why do you think that? And then she opened up to John chapter 1 and started explaining to me how in John 1, the Word was God. No. And somehow that led us into a conversation about how I gave them an article that she didn't like. It was from Christianity Today, which she called Unchristianity Today. And I shouldn't make the students think as much. She went on and on and on. And at the end of it, she said, well, I'm just going to have to seriously think about pulling my daughter from this school because I can't have heretics teaching it. I did feel better because later on that afternoon I found out that she called our English teacher Satan. So I think one of the scariest parts of youth ministry, and anytime we're dealing with students, and if you're a parent, you probably know this because you're probably one of those parents, because I know I am too, is parents can be a little bit scary, especially if you don't have kids, because it's hard to I'm trying to guide you and your kid, but I don't have kids. I remember before I had kids, I'm like, I'm not an expert in your student, but I'm being looked at as though I'm an expert in your student, but I don't even have my own yet. I don't understand. And so there was always this disconnect. And unfortunately, it took me probably far too long to figure out how in the world to do this. But as time went on, I learned a few things, so I thought I'd share a few of those things with you. And if you've got a few things you want to add on here, please, by all means, shout them out. But the first thing is to remember that parents are the primary disciple makers. As much as in many situations, if students are coming from a broken home or families that aren't really on board with the whole Jesus thing, yeah, you might be the primary disciple maker in that child's life. However, from a biblical perspective, that is the parent's job. So for the parents that are a part of your church and that are actively engaged and those kind of things, your job is coming alongside and helping. And I know there's situations where, the parent says one thing and you're thinking another, you're hearing it from the kid, you're hearing it from the parent, and there's a disconnect and you don't really know which story's right. And it's our job to support the parents. And at the end of the day, I've seen lots of messages on Facebook, youth pastor groups and whatnot about pastors being upset that a parent makes a decision about a particular thing, especially my kid can't go on to Millennium because they're not grounded, those kinds of things. It's hard, but we have to kind of swallow that, try to counsel the parents. At the end of the day, they're the ones that have to stand before the throne and give an account for how they raise their kids. We're just here to help. And the faster I realize, the better I realize that, the sooner I realize that, the faster whatever, it helped me understand the students better. It helped me see their situation a little bit better. It helped me really kind of dial in and partner with the parents. And one of the things that we actually used to do, because we were required to, and I like being required to do things because it's helpful, because then it makes me do them, and then I get into good habits, is we had to email a parent of a student every week and say something nice about their students. And so for the first 6 weeks, it's really easy. Because you got those 10 students, you're like, awesome students. I said 2 a week, this is great. And all of a sudden you start to get to the students that you're like, I don't really like you that much. I don't know what I'm supposed to say. So you start to really pay attention to the student in a way. You're like, oh, okay, now I can say this or that or whatever. And it helps the parents see their kids in a different light. It helps them to know that you're coming alongside to help them disciple their kids. Also, reach out to parents who aren't believers. You could be discipling those parents. It's really easy to have those kids that come in and you see them and you're like, it's great you're here. I don't know where you're coming from because your friend brought you or whatever. But to be able to find a way to connect with those parents and offer them some kind of information, like hey, Johnny was at youth group tonight. We're so glad he was here. We learned these things. Let me know if I can help you in any way. It may fall on deaf ears. We had lots of parents who weren't believers, weren't anything. We had one mom who, and let me say this, in the teaching world, it's very easy for teachers to kind of have animosity toward parents and actively avoid them. And then the gossip starts about what parents, people don't like. There was one mom, her son played football for me. She was known as crazy. She had some serious mental issues. She had some depression things going on, and they were serious. Her husband had died years before, so she was raising kids on her own. She had 3 total, and all of her kids were great kids, but she was a little bit nuts. She would call and say random things, and she didn't go to church, but she just wanted her kids in a good environment. So because her son was on the football team, I had to communicate with her. And people were like, why are you talking to her? Why are you dealing with her? Why are you trying to reach out to her? I mean, this isn't a Christian school. People are asking me these questions. And I just kept doing it. I just kept talking to her, just kept reaching out. Every time she did be at a game, I made a point to say hi to her. And by the end of it, by the time he graduated, she was back in church. She was seeking out healing because she had never recovered from her husband's death. That was part of her issues. And her son was getting married, and she was greatly looking forward to being a grandparent. And the weirdest part of that, this whole side story, is I'm having my 3rd kid, and he's having his first, and we're on the elevator together. This is not right. Which leads me to the 3rd thing. It's their kid. It's their kid. Not our kids. And sometimes we get that because these are our kids, but it's their kid. I think that's important to remember, just to constantly remind ourselves that it's their kids. So when they call us upset about something, it's because it's their kid. When they're just not, or maybe they're thrilled about something, you're like, it's not that big of a deal. It's their kid. My daughter is a dancer, and we're actually one of the parents at the dance studio where we tell the instructors, hey, you want to reprimand my kid, you want to beat them senseless, you want whatever you need to do, you do. It's cool, like it's all right. And they're blown away. They're like, you're the only one like that here. And I was telling the director the other day, like, you have to remember, it's their kid, and every parent wears parent goggles. Every kid is the best athlete. Every kid is the best dancer. Every kid is the best singer. Every kid is they're always the best because it's their kid. And that's cool. Because if you're a parent, you should do the same thing. My kid is my one daughter is the funniest kid ever. My other daughter is, I think, one of the most beautiful people ever in the whole world. I think my oldest is the best dancer in the world. And my youngest, because he says he likes basketball, is going to play in the NBA. That's just how this works, right? We all think that. And finally, I think this might be the toughest for some of us, is parents are still looking at you as though you're the expert. You're the expert in teens. You're the expert in youth ministry. You're the expert in how to reach their kids. They're struggling just as much on how to reach their kids as you are on how to reach them. So you're all here together. They're looking at you going, help. Some parents are just sending their kids to youth group because that's just the place that they want to go. But there are some that are actually crying out to you saying, I need help. I don't know how to do this. Because the second you have something figured out, it changes and you have to figure something new out. And it just keeps changing and you can never keep up and you always feel like you're behind. And the more people you have in your corner, the better. Because a church is about a community raising kids, not just one or two people. So I just want to throw out some big rocks. What I want to do is, like I said, I didn't want to dig and I just sit here and lecture you. What for you guys has worked with parents? And what, maybe something that hasn't worked? What are some things that you guys have experienced? What great funny stories that you might have that we could all laugh at you?
Yeah, so I never actually started to tackle singing before. So when I started to volunteer at church in East, I went and talked to the kid then. He was like kind of intimidated and new. He just like looks like a hard man. And I took like he had it in my head. So it's like, but I walked up to him, shook his hand, was like, "Hey, I'm asking if I can spend time with a kid like once a week and teach him the word and just like hang out with him." And so it was like see his face light up. I think parents really appreciate the asking permission, assuming that you're gonna say yes.
Yeah.
But they never. That's like, I mean, that's like kids. Also, that's kind of creepy.
I think if I could add something to this list, and I'm not sure why it's not, but I just forgot, is you can never communicate enough, ever. You can never communicate with parents enough. Every little thing. In fact, it's even helpful to offer them, here's what we're working on, create some videos, maybe of yourself to say, here's some of the things that we're talking about. Ask them, what's the best way of communicating? How can I communicate best with you? Because you may think, I put a newsletter out. Well, maybe the newsletter doesn't work for them. I sent an email out. Well, maybe that doesn't work for them. Or, what is their best preferred method? That doesn't mean you need to do 30 different things, but figure out what works and do it multiple ways and make sure that they understand that they're communicating with us. And then I think the number one rule everyone lives by is if you ever have somebody that critiques too much of something, put them in charge of it. They'll either end up really awesome, or they will never do it again because they will realize it's more difficult than they thought. What else? Yeah.
I wanted to just ask Steve, specifically when you said you went through a tough time with the team, what do you think helped you? Did they take you to McDonald's? Did they just hang out with you? Did they pour scripture into you? Did they want to know what it was like for you emotionally, or was it truly just the time?
A lot of it was the time. They recognized that I was struggling and jumped in. I think a lot of times we'll see students that are struggling and are like, hopefully someone else deals with that, because that's a scary place to enter, and they were willing to enter in. I can remember actually being in Momentum and walking through some of these things and sitting on a hillside with one of the leaders, and he just sat there with his arm around me as I kind of was crying, processing, and struggling, and prayed for me and prayed with me. Those were some of the best things. They weren't things that I needed counseling for or needed to have long conversations with, but as I was processing what God was doing in my heart and what I was wrestling through with some things with my parents, and just future direction and all that, they sat there with me and spent that time with me. I'm sure they said some words. I'm sure
that's what I'm saying. I think we tend to talk too much,
Yeah.
and mostly it seems like it's just time.
Yeah, the time and pray. I knew that they were there, and they prayed for me. Don't ever, if there's a chance and you think, I should pray for them, pray for them, and pray with them. That's a really encouraging thing that I think is super easy to overlook.
I think it's the same principle probably true with parents. I mean, I think I'm a relational person, so for me, it's like this in church, just kind of working our lobby in church, talking to parents, just saying, bragging about their kid. There's always something. I'm an optimist. There's always something good to say about everybody. You know what I mean? Trying to do that stuff. But I think just continually touch points with parents where you're consistent. I think then even whether you're an expert or not, they think you might be an expert, but you're really not teaching them anything. You learn it all by yourself. But it's just the consistency of being there for them.
It's easy to kind of gravitate toward the same parents because you connect with them and you like them, and then there's the ones that are hoping they don't see me in church on Sunday. I actually started making a list out our parents in our ministry, and kind of like a little checklist. Have I had a connection with them recently, or has there been an oversight? Have I talked to them on the phone, or have I talked to them in person at an event or at church? Just to keep me organized. Otherwise, there'll be an oversight, and I'll miss people, and I don't want to do that.
Yeah, and sometimes you just need to be that person they vent to. They just need you to listen, and you don't need to feel like it's a personal attack on you. You just have to be that sounding board at that moment. And some of the best relationships can be developed out of that. I'll never forget, but I used to be a restaurant years ago, and I had a customer that came in, and he was unhappy about something, and he just laid into me. And in the middle of the restaurant was just yelling at me. And he got through his tirade, and I kid you not, he goes, thanks, sit down, I'll buy you a drink. I couldn't do that, but I sat down and talked for a few minutes, and he was like, thank you, no one else here will do that. He just wanted to vent. It wasn't my fault, but he just needed to vent. And it probably was the rest of his day. It wasn't that moment, but who knows how many other things are going on in their lives that at this moment is the moment they snapped and they had to unload. And you just did them a favor by letting them unload on you and not taking it personally. Saying, hey, it's cool. Like, no big deal. You know, I'm glad you shared that. I pray for you, you know, whatever. And we move on. And that will build a much stronger relationship.
What are some quick do's and don'ts of cooking your
Quick do's and don'ts of equipping your volunteers. Oh. I said one of these things, don't assume that they know things, so don't get afraid to tell them what to do. They're there, volunteers want to do things. They want to serve, that's why they're there. They love kids, they want to be with them, and so give them things to do. What those specific things are, that's going to look different for each context of ministry and what we do. I think the number one thing that I fail at doing is I shy away from that. I'm like, who am I to tell them what to do? But they signed up to be part of that, and I'm hoping most of you guys are volunteers. You want somebody to help you know what to do, right? To show you what to do or to tell you what to do. Not in a this is what you must do, but I mean, help you to see that. So don't be afraid to walk alongside the youth leaders and show them what those things are. Do you have anything to add?
I want to make sure we get through as much as possible.
Yeah,
we have
we're
about 5 minutes, technically. We'll talk too much. So if you want to jump into
Yeah, we'll do this a little bit real quick, and I'll just fly through some of these things. One of the things that I was going to mention, and last time you don't have to go to the slide there, but one of the best pieces of advice that I ever received as a parent is to be the adult you want your kids to become, because they will model after you. You can sit there and you can tell them all the things, but they're going to watch what you do. And if they see something contrary to what you're saying. And so the same thing I think works in student ministry. Be the adult that you want your kids to become. If you want your kids to love Jesus like crazy. If you want your kids to worship and stand up and sing, and you're like, why are they not doing that? Be the one who stands up and sings. They'll follow your example. If you want your kids to serve, serve. And so, how many times have you thought, man, I wish the kids would pick up their messes. I wish the kids would do this better. I wish they would see this need. Well, look inside first. Are you seeing those things? Are you picking up after things? Or are you just expecting them to do it while you stand back and watch and wait for them to do it? Or you just want to be the one to tell them to do it? Do it. So lead by serving. When you start to lead by serving, they will catch on. And don't just go ahead and do it all for yourself so they don't have to do anything. Start to help them see it. Do you see that? Let's go do this. Why don't you come help me stack these chairs? Why don't you come help me stand at the door and greet other people as they come? And so find those ways that you can serve. When you see a need, meet it. But then don't meet it alone. Take somebody with you so that they can start to see it. So when you lead by serving, it has a ripple effect for everything. And you also have a youth pastor, if you're a volunteer, a youth pastor that's looking and seeing all the things and realizing, I can't do it all on my own. I wish somebody could do that. And when you just arise and start taking those things, do it. You just take those things. But your kids will follow in that. Another example, another thing you can do, this isn't necessarily serving, but ways to set an example, is sit with the kids. Sit with the kids. There are a lot of times in youth group where the kids all sit and the leaders stand in the back or sit in the back. And or the kids, they're on comfortable chairs, so we need the comfy chairs. So we're going to sit in the back. No, jump in and be with them and sit beside them. For one thing, you can help when they get out of hand, put your hand on them like, you guys need to pay attention. Or you're there when the opportunity comes. Be on time for the programs so that your youth pastor or your paid staff aren't there alone while the first kids arrive. Be there on time. And if you can, stay late. Sometimes you've been there, you've invested all your time, and you've got to go. That's cool. But if you have time to stay late, stay late. That's honestly when most of the conversations can happen, is afterwards when the kids are lingering and you can stay and talk with them. And it's also when the cleanup needs to happen, because other people would like to get home to their families as well. And so if you all work together, it happens quicker. And then don't talk only to the youth leaders. actually talk to the kids. Doesn't mean you can't talk to youth leaders, but don't huddle up and only be with them, because the kids are going to be like, I thought they were here for me. Why are they only talking to each other? But you're not a chaperone, you're a leader. A chaperone keeps peace and safety. A leader kind of brings about change and helps lead. So be a leader, one who does these things. And you do that by serving. Not by telling others what to do, but showing others what to do. Let me give you 3 passages of scripture. I'm not going to read them all, but if you're taking notes, jot these down and look them up. Some passages on service. John 13:15. John 13:15. You're familiar with that passage where Jesus is washing his disciples' feet. He set an example. Now, he set the example specifically in washing feet in that passage, but it's also an example of service among some other pictures that are in that. But people lead by serving. Titus 2. There's a lot of things that happen at the beginning of that passage about who teaches who and how we go about that. But in 2:7 it says, in everything, set them an example by doing what is good. So as those that are leading and teaching, set an example because they're watching and show them what to do that's good. And then Luke 10:43 to 45, we had the disciples that were jockeying for position and arguing who was the greatest, and Jesus just lays it out. He said, whoever wants to be great among you must be your servant. Whoever wants to be first must be slave of all. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. So, be the adult that you want your kids to be, and do that through serving and setting an example.
Real quick. We talked about a lot of these already, but I want to touch on the last one real quick. It's something that I have used because I can be slow at capturing youth culture. I don't want to hear what I don't want to talk about. It's something called reverse mentoring. Some of you may have heard of it. But it's allowing students to mentor you. It's allowing students to speak to you about, not just about what they're going through in their life, but allowing them to even respectfully challenge you, respectfully have good discussions. Some of the greatest lessons I have learned over the course of my time working with students have been from students. Some of them have been not done well, others have been done well, where I've been challenged, whether it's theologically, whether it's relationally. I've had students, just flat out felt comfortable enough to walk up to me and say, listen, I'm not happy with how you handled that. Can we talk about it? That blows me away. Because if you feel comfortable telling me that means I must have done something right. But to be able to empower them to do that, and then to respond almost even further builds that relationship, because now you've responded saying, yeah, we can. And being able to apologize. One of the greatest things, even with my own kids, that I have found is I'm still a broken sinner, so are they. And guess what? I screw up a lot. So I lose my cool, I lose my temper with them, or something doesn't go according to plan, and there's crying, there's fighting, there's door slamming, whatever's going on, right? To be able to say, you know what? In your fit of rage, little 10-year-old child, you taught me something. The look on your face taught me something. And I need to repent, and I need to apologize, and I need to ask for your forgiveness. Sometimes as leaders, we kind of get like, I'm a leader, and I got to be above all that, and I have to be perfect all the time. Well, we're not. We're going to make mistakes. So allowing our students to, in one way or another, teach us something, and admit to that, and even admit to that to them, is a powerful thing in your own life, in your own walk, but also in the relationship that you're developing with your students. So I know we don't have a ton of time. We got a session coming up in a little bit here. If you have questions, I'm going to say this, write this down. If you have questions, because you know what? I really would like some information on this. Email me, SKOZAK@cenational.org. That will help Dave and I craft, whether it be videos or podcasts in the future, so that we can continually be answering these kinds of questions and really try our best to continually be helping you guys in your efforts to mentor and walk with our kids and stuff. Cool?
What's the name of your podcast again?
On Mission Insights. It's on Spotify and it's on Apple. We're out there.
Again, on mission what?
What's that?
On mission.
On mission.
Insight.
All right. Cool. Let me pray for us real quick and we guys go. Father, thank you for today. Thank you for this time together. Just thank you for this group and everything that they're giving to their students. Father, we continue to pray for them, that you'll give them opportunities to minister to their students. I pray that this time was beneficial to them. I know it was to me. I'm sure it was to them as well. God, we just thank you. We just continue to ask you to move before us. Just pave the way and move you in tune to what your Spirit is doing in the lives of our students. And we would be ready when we're asked to have a discussion or a conversation or lead a student to you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.